The worst horror movie I ever saw was fucking great.
Hello and welcome to This May Hurt a Bit. My name is James Strayer and this is
John C. Myers.
And we are a horror franchise podcast discussing each film in popular and not so popular franchises. And today we are discussing none of that. We are talking about what we've been watching during October. This is a third annual, I believe, Calling of the Fright Boys here. Most importantly, we have our returning guest. He does all the music for this show. He releases music under the names Dead When I Found Her and recently an album under the name Haunted Hospital. Michael Holloway, welcome back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So I think the last couple of episodes of this ilk, we've mentioned that for, I don't know, like the last 5 years or so, definitely since the pandemic, the three of us have been keeping a spreadsheet going over every movie that we watch during October. So this is kind of our
like cool guys.
Yes, very cool guys here. We keep spreadsheets of horror movies that we watch with a star rating.
For the audience who wants to know who the coolest guy is, it's definitely John Myers, because every year he absolutely smokes Jim and I on the quantity of horror movies watched. I mean, he just blows us away.
It's a little trick I like to call being unemployable.
Yep.
And not leaving the house.
There you go.
Follow my steps to success.
Right.
Your grind set.
You know what? I respect it just as much knowing that. I think you probably double. I think one year you like tripled what Jim and I were managing to pull off.
There was one year that I went pretty nuts with it. This one I'm sitting right now on October 22nd. I'm at 34.
Wow.
And that's including like basically a week off where my partner's anniversary. So I mean, it's basically like 2 a day for most of it. So I just do a bunch of double features.
My goodness. I love that. Yeah, and I was going into this tonight thinking like, man, I'm pretty low. I haven't bothered counting up the amount, but it almost looked sadly like a normal month of movie watching for me, not anything like extra going on. Although I did go to the Hollywood Theater a lot this month, so I saw a lot of movies there.
For relative to my usual doings, I think I've done pretty well this year. I think the primary distractions have been that for some reason, I'm really into the baseball postseason this year. It happens like every 3 years. I get into baseball over again, try to relive my childhood baseball boy. And then Silent Hill 2 came out, video game. And that is certainly pulling some hours away from movie time.
Yeah, I've consciously like not been playing games because I'm like, I should pick back up Alan Wake 2. I'm really enjoying it. No. I got to watch Dr. Giggles. That's what's important.
It is.
Dr. Giggles is important.
So, yeah, I mean, I think in years past, we've just sort of like gone round and picked out 3 or 4 that we wanted to make sure that we brought attention to, that we liked specifically, or if there was something that really didn't work for us, obviously, with the philosophy of this show, trying to keep it on the things that we actually do like. Michael, let's start with you as the guest. What was, what was one thing that really struck you this month?
I'm going to start with one that I know all 3 of us saw. So let's talk about In a Violent Nature. I gave this one pretty high marks. I really liked it. I didn't like everything about it. I think that the best way to describe this movie, if anyone hasn't seen it yet, is this is like a slasher movie boiled down to its purest elements. It's like no fat on it, just pure slasher mechanics. It spends a lot of time kind of over the shoulder of the villain in a very methodical and slow way. It's not a fast-paced movie, but it's just so raw. It's just bare bones down to the point of what is a slasher. Let's just get right to it. And everything feels almost naturalistic in it. They don't bother to introduce the characters the way other slasher movies do. It's kind of like the killer stumbles upon them and they're just going about their camping, out in the woods shit. But you feel like you're never actually introduced to them. You just sort of stumble into, here's some teenagers or however old they're supposed to be in the woods. And we kind of like find them through the killer finding them. And you just you realize I can piece together who these people are just by seeing them interact with each other. I don't need like a formal movie introduction to, and here's our players for this edition of Friday the 13th. Clearly the biggest influence is Friday the 13th franchise, obviously.
I thought immediately of part 5, Friday the 13th part 5, in terms of boiling things down to it's the core thing of it. The part 5 was like, it's not even Jason. It's just like, let's just show really violent, ugly killings and boobs and, just make it as gritty as possible. We'll kind of throw some story after the fact. But this is like that, but more artfully done, for sure. And it's not just a gimmick. It's not just from the killer's point of view. And that's it. Like, I think by doing that, like you said, it becomes this much more methodical kind of naturalistic thing. Because there's not a soundtrack for a lot of it. A lot of it is just him walking, which is funny because my partner Hazel was doing some housework in the other room and like had on at one point some sad guitar song that was like some folky song as he was walking through the woods. So I'm like, this is like the opening to McCabe and Mrs. Miller now. It gave this very like poignant quality to the killer trudging along.
There's a lot of like diegetic radio music of what people are listening to in the film. So you do get like sound, but yeah, there's definitely no score, which is very noticeable. And I agree with you that it's a gimmick that actually works. Like when the movie started, I was like, I think I see what they're doing here. A slasher from the point of view of the killer. Is this going to be really boring? But very quickly I was pulled in by it and it worked. The movie did not stick the landing for me. I didn't understand the final sequence. I didn't understand what it was going for. I found it anticlimactic and mostly I just was just kind of baffled. Like, why am I watching this particular scene unfold? It didn't feel like the end of a movie. Other than that, though, everything before that, I was very into. I enjoyed it, but the ending. But I absolutely understand what you mean, and it's kind of, because I don't want to give too many spoilers away or anything. But like, I'm not sure how you could have ended it. I will also say that I think that because the nature of in a Violent Nature, I think the violence, even though there's like some from like a horror movie standpoint, there's some great kills in here, but I think it renders so much of the kills like so senseless. And you just see how like empty this violence is. And I thought that was kind of amazing that I'm like, that you managed to do this with a slasher movie. You took what some might consider a bug of a slasher movie. Well, that's not true because it is a feature. But you took what some people consider a negative of a slasher movie and actually turned it into a positive and like turned it into a look at the genre. And I think that was pretty ingenious. And the effects are totally practical, like unapologetically practical, sometimes to the point that it actually feels like you're watching a Friday the 13th movie from the 80s because you just full on see the mannequin head or the cheap body suddenly appearing in place of the real body. And I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it didn't bother me because I'm so used to this kind of movie. I'm used to seeing that kind of thing, where you notice the switch. But I really appreciated that they just went totally practical and everything. And it kind of walks a line between like extreme, so extreme that it's doesn't actually feel violent in a way because it's just like a cartoon. It's kind of that Kill Bill thing, right? Where you're like, this is like hyper violence, but yet it's crossed a line into something that like is more comical than it is disgusting. Because the movie, again, is sort of has just this diegetic sound. In the story, there's not any soundtrack to make it wacky or scary, something like that. It's kind of a almost like a Kuleshov test or something like that, where it's left blank for you to kind of either react with horror or like, oh my God, this is absurd. What is happening right now? There is, when you were talking about the senseless nature of the violence, there's one kill that I want to dance around it a little bit because I don't want to get too spoilery since we're suggesting these new movies for October. But like, I know we're kind of group chatting about it and just saying that there was one kill that actually kind of got to me because it was so slow and it went on for so long. It was using the large machine, if you remember. And I know that was a moment that, Michael, you said that like that you felt taken out of it because it looked fake. Yeah. And there was something about it to me that still worked for me. And maybe it was because there was the lack of music. And we were just sitting there in that one camera angle for the longest time, watching him dismember this person with a machine. I think that was something too that I was struck by, like the confidence of doing that. The like that you're just making me sit and watch this. That you're not worried about like, well, is this the best this could possibly look? You just want me to be in this moment, right? And I appreciated that a lot more. And it made me kind of feel like I was in good hands for the rest of the movie for what they were going for. Well, it's the kind of movie that introduces early on the concept and you kind of decide you're on board or not. And if you are on board, it did a really good job of like rewarding you for being on board with it, being like, now that you've accepted our thesis, we're going to deliver on it and deliver the best possible movie for this particular sort of concept that we're delivering.
Right.
Yeah, the people in the movie were just annoying enough to feel like a retro horror movie, but never so much so that I got like angry.
Mhm.
And that is a delicate line.
Yeah, there's several that I know that a few that we've all watched, and then a few that I've watched where it's like you don't need to go this hard on making the characters unlikable.
Yeah,
you really don't.
We'll talk about Abigail later.
Yeah.
Oh, I was actually thinking of Don't Look Away, but
oh well, that's
yeah. So 3 thumbs up from the 3 thumbs here. Not that we have a rating system necessarily, but yeah, watch In a Violent Nature. It's on Shudder. It got a lot of attention this year, so I was very excited to check this one out as soon as October started. John, what about you? With your 34 movies or whatever.
Yeah, they're not all good. A lot of them are like, yeah, that was fine.
Yeah.
A couple of real stinkers, but I've been diving in a bit, and this is thanks to the movie club we did, a little bit into the works of William Castle.
Yes.
Just the showmanship of it. So infamously, The Tingler, which is the Vincent Price movie about it.
I almost said The Tinkler.
The Tinkler. Yeah. Well, that was me watching it. It was so scary. But the gimmick is like, so there's a thing that goes up your spine when you're afraid and will crush your spine and kill you. And what they would do is in the theater when it was showing, they had some chairs that were wired up to like zap you when the Tingler attacks, or like they would have a plant. There's a part in the movie where like the Tingler is released in a theater and like a woman faints, so they'd have a plant like faint, and then you'd hear Vincent Price over the speakers go like, "Oh no, it's fine. A woman fainted. Don't worry about it." And then I watched Mr. Sardonicus, which is okay. Like, it's not an amazing movie, but the gimmick at that one is the movie just sort of ends, and William Castle, who introduces the movie, comes back on, is like, "You think the killer got off too easy? Reach under your chairs. You're given these placards that have a thumbs up on them. Either, hold the thumb up or turn it upside down and show it to the projectionist, and we'll vote." And he pretends to count the vote. They only shot the one end. He pretends to count the vote. And then it's just like, "Oh, turns out you guys want to see him suffer. Okay, here's a scene of him dying at the end." And just that kind of stupid stuff.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. The gimmicky showiness of horror, I kind of enjoy. And like, I was just reading something today about, there's some Hugh Grant horror movie called Heretic that's coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And there's apparently a specific scene involving blueberry pie. And they're like, some theaters will be pumping blueberry smell into the theater. Do that 100 times more than like, here's a cool popcorn bucket. That shit sucks. Make going to the movie silly again. I love it.
Oh, so you mean you really want to get into 40X? Yeah.
Yeah, 40X. Absolutely. Spray me in the face when I'm watching Geostorm. Just have a guy with a mop smack me in the head as I'm watching the Gerald Butler movie.
It's a fact that most of the time that I go out to the theater, halfway through the movie, I'm always thinking, man, I wish this was more like being at a Gwar concert.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Completely. Yeah.
Throw some shit in my face.
Yeah.
I'm here to get wet.
Mm-hmm. You got that on a t-shirt, don't you? You just walk into parties. I'm here to get wet.
I'm here to get wet.
Hose me down. Speaking of the Tingler, though, I had a funny reaction to when we all watched that movie as a group, because I sort of misinterpreted what it was when I heard about there being electric shocks in chairs in the movie theater, because the first scene in the movie involves a guy on death row. And I created this whole thing in my head about, oh, this is going to be a movie about a death row and electric shocks. And like, it's going to be like Shocker. Like, isn't that a Wes Craven movie?
Yeah,
that is a Wes Craven movie. Yeah.
But then it turned out the movie's not about that at all. And I was really thrown, because I kept thinking, like, when is this movie going to be about the electric chair? Like, who's gonna go onto death row now in this story? And it never happened. And it just
little Tingler monster
misled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these aren't like great movies, but I just had a lot of fun.
Oh, sure.
It's not great.
Yeah.
No, but it's very retro. You have to have the patience for that style of retro.
Yeah. Like it was, I mean, particularly Mr. Sardonicus is just it's a campfire tale just stretched out to an hour and a half, but it was enjoyable. How about you? What was a big surprise for you?
Well, let's see. Because Michael sort of teed it up. I don't think you've seen this one yet, John, but Gwar concert, definitely thought that way towards the end of The Substance. And that's a brand new one. And it's 2.5 hours long, and it stars Demi Moore. And I don't think it's necessarily too long, but I will agree with Michael that I know that your complaint was that it had kind of one idea, and it was kind of stuck in that one idea for a long time.
Well, and speaking of Gwar, what I said when I came out of the theater was the climax. Well, one of the 9 climaxes of the movie. It wants to be Carrie, but all it had was a guar hose.
But
and anyone who's seen the movie knows exactly what I'm talking about.
But I was into that. Like I was pretty happy with it. Like I could tell, that worked for me just fine.
I liked the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thumbs up on it overall. I just thought it was 45 minutes longer than it should have been. I mean, the thing is isn't it almost 2.5 hours or something?
I think.
I think there's a really great 90-minute horror movie in there.
Yeah.
And I think that it got overextended. I think it really feels like a case of someone who no one could say no to, right? In terms of editing choices, story choices. I mean, the movie keeps ending. It's like the end of the Return of the King. It's just like, oh, and here's another final scene. Oh, what if we had another final scene?
Return of the King is ending a 12-hour film, so it is allowed to do those.
Jim, it's not 2003. We're going to relitigate.
Go back
Peter
to your
Jackson's choices. I love the Return of the King.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed The Substance and I love Return of the King.
Yeah.
Both have ending problems.
For me, it was... I couldn't believe how far Demi Moore just went with it. There's like, what do they say? She left nothing on the field in that movie. And it's great to see someone like her just go full bore into horror. Some people were calling it like Cronenberg style. I'd say it's more like Brian Yuzna. It's like closer to like Society.
Well, it's both. I would say it's both. Yeah, it absolutely has the body horror of Cronenberg. So much of the movie's body horror. But the effects and the way that it mounts towards the end really does feel more like Stuart Gordon and Brian Yuzna.
See, that makes me excited because like one of my complaints with a lot of the more modern horror movies I saw is just I'm so tired of how Poe-faced everything is. How like it's serious and real and there's plenty of good horror like that, and I certainly enjoy certain horror like that. But there's some stuff where it's like, man, this is not nearly as breezy as it should be to kind of get this stuff going.
Right.
And like if you just had a tiny sense of humor about what you're doing. Even we teased Abigail a little bit. I think if Abigail was a little bit lighter, it would have been a lot more fun.
The Substance also has style to it. Like the presentation of each scene pulls you in right away because it has a very specific aesthetic to it. Even just the way it's handling fonts, the way it introduces the Substance product itself and the way that it's labeled and the fonts on that. Everything is like branded as the movie, and it feels artificial, but in a good way.
See, to me, one of the things I'm excited about it, and don't spoil it for me, I guess. But like, I find something very uncanny about Margaret Qualley.
Agreed.
There's something about her that my hackles go up a little bit. Don't know what the deal is, but there's something about her. And I had that for a long time with Allison Williams. She was on Girls, whatever, that it'd Get Out, that like, she always seemed like this kind of glassy eyed psychopath, like the kind of person that's just asking the teacher if we have more homework.
Yeah.
Then I heard an interview with her. She's incredibly charming and lovely. But just like, I haven't seen that yet. Everything I've seen with Margaret Qualley, she's a weirdo. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's just it. Is I haven't seen her play a human being yet.
Well, she's a bit of a weirdo in the Substance,
I'm
for sure.
So that will help the movie. Either I'll learn that that's a human being I'm watching, or be like, yeah, that's a freak.
It does make me laugh that people are taking. I think, and maybe I should have looked this up before I said this, but like I think it won like a script award at Cannes or something like that, and like people are trying to call it like really heady, and there's definitely ideas to be explored in this movie. But it's a Tales from the Crypt movie or like a thing. God. It's like an EC Comics like feature,
I think that it's misinterpreted because they think, oh, if a female director makes a movie with female themes with lots and lots of nudity, right, about themes like the male gaze and look at the way these women are being treated, then instantly it's politicized as like this is a message movie. Right. But I think the movie is a trashy movie. I don't think it's trying to. I know the director has been interviewed and talks about subverting the butt shot and all that. I think that's just all talk and publicity. I don't buy any of it. It's just a trashy Brian Yuzna style horror movie. And if there's a message, it's the most basic, simplistic message ever, which is, man, men sure are shitty horn dogs that leer at women all the time. That's the message.
It's like, I'm not going to argue with that, but at the same time,
Hollywood sucks because producers are those kind of men. We get that's a new message.
Well, horror gets treated so strangely in general, like, because it's either, we went through the whole thing of like elevated horror versus regular horror. But I think there's still a certain amount of that where people are like, well, horror's back. Horror's always been around. It makes money.
Yeah.
It's just how much people want to spend on it. And like, certainly something like Terrifier 3 topping the box office, people get excited about that. And then, yeah, when it's something that, oh, it's horror, but I can see themes in it. People are surprised that happens.
Right.
I think sometimes still, because it's, if you're not that familiar with it, yeah, you just expect the dumbest thing ever all the time.
I like that Terrifier 3, all of those are so base that no one even tried to pretend like, oh, it made $18 million. Yeah. Well, we better talk about how it's important now. Like, no, you just cannot do it.
Well, so I did see one tweet. Someone's like, we need to, hopefully we can get to a place where we're talking about Terrifier 3 beyond the gore. And someone else was like, you don't want that. Yeah. You don't want to go into like some of the themes and shit about Terrifier. You do not want to.
But also, the gore is the only reason those movies are made. They serve no other purpose than to push the envelope on gore. And some people may enjoy that, others may not. But like, that's why it exists. It doesn't have anything beyond that. So, and this is a movie where the franchise started with, well, actually not the short film, but the original Terrifier one. He hangs a woman upside down and saws through her body, starting at her, between her legs. Like,
that's where we begin.
That's the level
that is
you
the
understand
lore
what this
of Terrifier
is about.
None of us have seen Terrifier 3. Is that correct? I have not seen it yet.
No. I mean, I don't get excited about these movies. They're not. I almost feel like it's going to be homework for me in a way. And
yeah, I'll check it out eventually.
I kind of felt that way with the first two.
Yeah.
I'm glad I watched them just so I kind of know. And there was some stuff I liked about them, but it's not top of my list. I'm excited that it did well.
I am too, definitely. And it brings up an interesting point, which is just 10, 15 minutes ago, we're talking about how In a Violent Nature has these over the top practical effects for doing gruesome gore scenes and how much we like the movie. And then I'm thinking, okay, well then why don't I love Terrifier? And sometimes I don't know where that line is, because Terrifier, one of its big things is it's all practical effects, right? And the whole point is to push the envelope and go as far as possible. And yet I don't like it the way that I liked In a Violent Nature. And I'm going to have to, write some papers on this or something, because I don't know yet why that is.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's the presentation of it. I think it's the fact that there's not really a story. There's not really, at least in the first two, and it's not really like rules for how art works. He just kind of, he's going to just kill everybody, and it kind of stops being interesting at a certain point. I think there's also, for me anyway, and I think this is true from what I hear, this is true of the third one, they look awful. I hate the way the movies look. They're just ugly looking movies. Just like however they color them or whatever.
I don't understand what's going on there. I really liked the Late Night with the Devil, but it looked the same way. It had that same weird, and I know in that movie it's because they were trying to mat it to look like a 70s film, but it still had that sort of, it looked sharp and clear, even though it looked like it was trying to look like 70s film. And the result is something that's neither, right? It's like it becomes some weird amalgam of looks that it's trying to be, that becomes its own thing that is really off-putting in a way. And Terrifier 2 definitely had that feel where you're like, this isn't shitty video. If you want to make it like have scan lines in it and like weird video warp and all that and wound flutter in the sounds, sure, go that route. But like, it wasn't that. It just has like I always think of like orange and brown when I think about the color palette of that movie.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
I'm just very over killer clowns. Like just the conceit of a goofy clown killing is boring to me. And so that's why it took me a very long time to come around to watching the first two for what I liked about them.
Anymore, and maybe it's just because I'm so dark and twisted.
Yeah.
But I feel like you don't encounter like regular clowns as much as you encounter weird, crazy clowns in pop culture now.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's not just like, oh yeah, no, clowns. Everyone you see, they're going to be clowns there. No one likes clowns.
Yeah.
So it's just exists now as this more like
horror
juggalo
thing.
Horror thing,
right?
Where no one's excited to see Bippo or whatever.
Yeah.
No offense to Bippo, I'm sure he's great.
Having said that, all three of us will end up watching Terrifier 3, I'm sure, as soon as it streams. So yes.
My arms crossed.
Yeah. Thrill me. Yeah. All right, Michael, what else you got?
Second for me would be the Spider Labyrinth. This is a Italian horror movie from 1988, directed by Gianfranco Giagni. I'm sure I'm mangling that, which is a name I haven't heard before. I'm a huge Fulci fan. I'm a huge Argento fan. So this was kind of fun to watch an Italian horror movie by some other Italian horror director.
There you go.
But Spider Labyrinth is not great, but I totally thought it was worth watching. I think you watched it, right, Myers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's fun. Like it's got a vibe. It's got an atmosphere. It's one of those movies that like starts in the United States and then immediately finds a reason to leave the United States and go be somewhere else, like a good Fulci movie. And then have the final scene back in there, like New York City.
Yep.
Yeah, but really, we filmed this in Malta, right?
Get a tree.
And it's a little light on gore or horror stuff, but there's just enough to keep you motivated for those reasons. But mostly, it just kind of had like one of those guy wandering around in a foreign city, feeling confused while everyone around him is acting creepy. It's a bit, it's definitely a bit Wicker Man inspired because it constantly plays on the idea of you're in a foreign city and every time you're trying to do something like, I'm just trying to have some coffee in this one cafe, or I'm just trying to walk down the street, every single person that he looks at is like staring at him. They're giving him the weird eye. Even children are doing it. Old ladies are doing it. He cannot go anywhere without, and he's like, what the hell? And so it's kind of fun to figure out, well, obviously we know these people are all in on something, but we don't know what it is. And then slowly you kind of learn more about what it is. And I thought the ending reveals of the larger scale of what's going on in this town were pretty effective. So I would give a thumbs up to Spider Labyrinth.
Yeah, it's basically H.P. Lovecraft's Shadow over Innsmouth, but with spiders instead of fish. The last, I don't know, half hour, 20 minutes, where it just starts going off the rails is a lot of fun and a lot of great visuals. Yeah.
It's not really about spiders, though, I would say. Don't because the Spider Labyrinth of the title is really more about sort of, I don't want to give away parts of the movie, but the concept of a web and an organization that functions as a web. And they do realize it with some actual spiders, but it's really not. I don't want people to think this is like a arachnophobia style horror.
Right. Yeah.
It is not. It is not.
But they does the kind of the same thing that the church does, where it's like, here's this ridiculously hunky guy as an academic, and you're like, yeah, sure.
Right. Why not? I love that. Yeah.
I don't buy for a second that this guy can do anything other than like blue steel, but whatever. It's fun to watch.
I was gonna say before you said Shadow over Innsmouth, I was like, it's starting to sound like a Dagon or even a Gymkata, if you will. Certainly,
the two pillars,
right? So I'm always a fan of that. Like the outsider stumbles into a creepy old town and everybody's in on something but him, and weird looks and all that kind of thing.
And of course, there's like an attractive assistant of the brilliant inventor guy, or not scientist or something that he's supposed to meet up with. And of course, she's immediately like hanging out with him in every scene. And you're just like, there's no way she's not a member of whatever is going on here. But the way that it plays out is actually pretty fun.
Well, and it's funny to me because I didn't look to see if there were different voices for it. But like a lot of Italian movies, it's dubbed later. I don't know if that's that actress's voice or if they got someone else to do it, because the person that character is just like spaghetti's just falling out of their mouth when they talk. They have such a thick Italian accent. And I was like, well, what did the person they're dubbing over sound like that they had to redub it with this voice? But it could very well be her voice. I don't know.
The other thing the movie got me thinking about, and this is going to get out there, but I think sometimes when I watch horror movies about how the protagonist reacts to what's going on, when like they're written as a person in a horror movie. So we have certain expectations about what is or isn't scary, but there's things in this, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like you sort of expect them to react in certain ways to certain things and not to react to other things based on what the rules of a horror movie are, not based on the rules of reality.
Sure.
But this movie kept like fucking with my head about what those rules should be, because the assistant girl, the attractive assistant, she immediately just starts doing shit like her hotel is across from his hotel, and at night, every night he's getting ready for bed and he looks out the window and she's like getting completely naked in her window with the light on, very obviously so that he'll see her, and he's just like, there she is.
Not what that's not what your neighbors do.
He's not. He doesn't think it's weird at all on any level, and I just didn't know how to react to his reaction to that.
Yeah.
And that scene happens. I think they show that like 3 times, and it's like a little more skin every time kind of thing. And it's like, okay, really, dude, she's really trying to get your attention, but he just seems completely unfazed. Like, oh, there she is undressing. Well,
Yeah, that was something that bugged me about a couple movies I watched. That idea of what you're talking about, like the way people are reacting. I know that was an issue for me with stop motion, where it was like, well, I know the twists and whatever that's going on, because like this is not how you would react to a strange girl just showing up in your house, or like some of the reactions of the main character in that, or in Oddity to a degree, I think had some of that, but yeah, that's just it's just the thing where it's like, I understand what you say, that kind of push pull of like, why would you go in that room? That's stupid. Versus it's a horror movie, you know they're going to go in that room. But then when you make it so it makes no sense at all that person would go in that room.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Rather than just being a bad decision versus like, there's no reason at all for it.
Horror movie psychology.
Right.
It's like its own. We have this whole sense of expectations about the way we think they're going to behave in certain types of situations that aren't real world situations. They're just horror movie situations.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
John, what else you got?
I don't really want to get into I Saw TV Glow because we did that on the on stage stuff. I really like that.
Yeah.
I guess this one I didn't love, but I need to give it credit because I am an avowed Mike Flanagan hater.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like Mike Flanagan, and this one was okay. I didn't actively hate it. Hush. Which is hilarious because it's a home invasion story, and the main character, played by, of course, his wife, Katie Siegel, who again is not an actor I'm particularly fond of. She is supposed to be deaf and mute. Great. One of the big things I hate about Mike Flanagan are his fucking speeches, and I can't stand them because it's not characters like doing stuff talking. It's just one character gives a whole speech, the other one sits and listens and goes, and then gives their whole speech. But this one was kind of exciting. It moved pretty good. It's again like it's not setting the world on fire, not anything brand new, but you know what you're getting going into a home invasion movie.
I haven't seen it, but it kind of predates all of his more famous stuff, right? This is like early Flanagan.
Yeah, it's one of his first movies.
It's an earlier one, yeah. Like I say, so it's a deaf mute, person deaf mute. You're going to eliminate that. There is a scene later in the movie where the character has a conversation with herself. Because Mike Flanagan can't solve a problem without fucking dialogue. Yeesh. Some of the last half hour falls apart a bit, but it was fun. It wasn't allowing Mike Flanagan to fall back on a lot of the crutches he uses that I don't like. So, not perfect, but I got it, credit where it's due. It was
fair. That's very fair.
Yeah.
And I've heard Hush is pretty good. You're not the first person to tell me that, and I believe it.
I want to like Mike. I want to figure out what the deal is, because I can't just get on everyone else that's told me it's great. I did not like Midnight Mass was like okay, but I have more negative things to say about it than positive. Fall of the House Usher is trash. And like, I just don't like stuff. So people will tell you, well, watch this. Hush was one, the Ouija board movie, the sequel that he did, apparently supposed to be.
Never seen that one. Yeah.
I haven't seen that one yet, but like, okay, this is at least moved it from garbage to mid for me.
Right.
So.
Wow. Myers just got through an entire bit on Flanagan and didn't mention Dr. Sleep.
I did. Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing. No, but I think this crowd we're all sort of in agreement on Flanagan, which hopefully won't lose you any audience members of this.
Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed Midnight Mass. I have not watched Usher. Yeah. Most of his stuff I lean towards not liking that much. Hush, I remember liking. I watched it when it first came out. I think it was a Netflix movie, actually. And I remember liking it just fine. I think that might have even been before he became capital MF Mike Flanagan.
Didn't he do the one with like Katie Sackhoff in the mirrors and stuff?
Yes,
Oculus. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a frustrating. It was all right.
Yeah, that was another one because I think that's what started this all up. People were like, "Oh, Oculus is so scary," and it was very much not or that interesting. So yeah, not my jam. But Hush, worth checking out, I'd say.
Yeah. Let's. I think we all three watched Oddity. So I really liked Oddity a lot.
Can I interrupt just briefly here to point out that since this is another one that all three of us watched, we keep stars out of 5 on our sheet. Jim gave it 4 stars out of 5. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. And Myers gave it 2 stars out of 5. Right. So Jim, you should continue with your thoughts. But I wanted to point that out because I'm going to be really interested to hear where we diverge on this one.
So I was excited about this one because I really enjoyed the director's previous movie, Caveat, which I don't remember a ton of, but I just remember, and I will probably say this multiple times about this movie, it's just the atmosphere of what he's able to do really draws me in. I think he's like a Irish director, so all of his films are like Irish countryside. I love the look of, his out in the middle of nowhere, the giant mansion. It's a fairly straightforward ghost story, maybe. I'm not quite sure. There's a little bit of a golem element, and that's fun too. But yeah, I mean, I really went for just the overall tone and the feel of this movie, and it managed to. Some of the twists, I think I kind of saw coming, but they weren't offensive to me at all. I was pretty on board with a lot of that kind of stuff, and all the performances are great too. Yeah, I liked it.
I watched it knowing nothing about it, and I really enjoyed it. So then I think a couple nights later, I watched Caveat, and I really enjoyed that. But what was interesting about watching both of those movies is I realized, okay, this is a director or writer-director with a very specific style and a very specific way of telling a story. And I have a feeling when we get to Myers in a second and to explain his 2 stars, I think I can understand it because the way that this guy tells a story is incredibly forced. Like, it is not naturalistic. It is not organic. It feels like you're watching like a chess game being played by 2 minds that are like thinking really hard about each move they're going to make. And then one person wins the chess match. And it's like every part of the script, every part of the way each character is introduced, the way each plot point is introduced feels belabored. But I like the way it's belabored. It feels intentional to me. It feels like he wants to tell a ghost story. Both of these movies are basically this guy wants to tell a ghost story. Both of these movies have this sort of like theme of he wants justice to be done to a wrongdoer. Mm-hmm. By the ghost. It's not really ghosts as enemies. It's ghosts as the, bringers of justice to bad humans who are murderers and whatnot. And both of them rely very heavily on extremely contrived plot points and plot beats, right? Caveat, especially, like the guy shows up at a house and they're like, well, we have to chain you to the wall. You can only navigate this house, to the distance that chain will allow you to go, which I love that part. It's great. But it's like, there's so many rules that the movie Caveat has to lay out about its plot at the beginning that I felt like I was sitting down to a board game.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you got to take care of my daughter, but she also has this mental health problem, but you're going to be chained to the wall. But also there's only one phone. Also, you're on an island. Also, there's a dog outside that it's like, I feel like the pieces are being set up in front of me. It's like a board game is about to be played. And then I'm watching some like clever people play the game in front of me. It's very contrived, but it totally works for me. I found both of those movies very, very entertaining, but they are what they are.
Yeah, I think that you kind of summed up part of my feeling about it is that it does feel very labored. I don't think there was an atmosphere. Having a soundtrack that just goes isn't an atmosphere. And it is a very simple story that every twist I could see coming a mile away. And I am a dullard for these kind of things. But it was just uninteresting to me. Like everything, like you said, it felt forced. It felt like kind of one of those idiot plots where it's like, if you just said this one sentence or said, talk to each other like normal people, this would be fine.
That usually
but
frustrates
you just can't
me.
do that.
Yeah.
That was very frustrating. Yeah. I was on board for like the first 20 minutes and then I just jettisoned. Like particularly when it became obvious that like, it's spoiler alert, I guess, but it's like, you've introduced 5 people. I'm sure one of them killed him. There's not the mystery element isn't really a mystery, but I don't know that it's supposed to be, but there's not anything there for me to grab onto if it's not a mystery. I do like how they didn't do what you were just describing, that a lot of the magic or whatever was very ephemeral. Like whatever that thing was, you kind of like the Golem-y kind of thing. You got an idea of how it worked, but they didn't explain.
I love that.
It has to have this and this has to have. But it's just like that's a perfect thing where their reaction to that seemed like out of whack to me. That there's like, oh, okay, yeah. Did you take it out of the box? No, I didn't take it out of the box. Whatever. Let's not talk about it anymore.
Right.
That is a perfect, that is a really good illustration of that point about our expectations of people in horror movies, where they should not have been so passive about that gift, right? That just shows up in the house.
If that thing was all of a sudden sitting at a table and the 3 of us got like a cabin in the woods for a weekend to hang out or something, and that thing was just sitting at the table, you would not hear me shut up about the fact that it was automatically sitting at that table all of a sudden. Yeah.
Caveat is structured the same way, where there's a a little rabbit
Yeah.
toy in Caveat that plays the drums.
Yeah, it makes an appearance in this
And
one.
the funny thing is, it really has nothing to do with the story. It really has nothing to do with what the plot is about and the people that are involved in the story. But it's just there because it's like, let's have this cool, horror object that is creepy. But yeah, I think that it's almost like it's all so contrived that I just sort of choose to buy into it and roll with it. But I can totally understand your complaints about it.
I wish they would have leaned more into the kind of feeling that was happening when the blind woman is sitting down with the new wife at dinner, like for food, and like her being just an awkward guest and like demanding food. And all she has is a charcuterie plate, like a thing you have to construct, and it's all like nice and out.
Right.
I got a huge kick out of that little like back and forth between them that was very subtle. And I was hoping it was kind of like, oh, this is kind of exciting. And then it went a completely different, in my opinion, more basic direction.
Mm-hmm.
And again, not to keep coming back to Abigail, but it's just one of those that I'm like, okay, it's another one of these kind of movies, but I don't feel like it justified its existence as another one of these kind of movies. If you replace it with any other of these kind of movies, it would have been just as fine.
Mm-hmm.
For talking about the William Castle and these sort of basic kind of chamber piece horror movies, it's a similar kind of vibe as those, but I enjoyed those a lot more.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should get into Abigail since all three of us watched that one as well. Yeah, I think I kicked off my September 30th with this one. I had been meaning to watch this one. I think this played at the Overlook Fest and nobody could get into it because everybody was like very, very excited for it. And this was one of those like, oh, there's something new on Hulu to watch. And so I fired this one up, a new horror movie. And, one of those ones too that I kind of wish that the trailers and the marketing and the posters and stuff just didn't like put it out on Front Street what it was all about. It would have been a little bit more fun if that was more of a reveal.
But even the name is a giveaway.
Yes.
Just the name, because you can't name the innocent little kidnapped girl the name of the movie and then not have everyone thinking clearly she's going to be more important than just being an innocent little kidnapped girl that has no further role in the plot other than to be like daughter of a rich man.
They should have called it Kidnap House 2000.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. I would have been excited to see that movie.
Yeah.
My main reaction to Abigail, which I gave 3 stars, is it just felt retro to me, but not old school 80s, 90s retro. It felt like 2000s retro. It just had this, the acting, the writing, the fact that one super annoying guy, I think he might be the first to get killed, but man, was he annoying the way he talked.
Yeah, I don't know if that is because that did only recognize that actor by seeing stuff about Euphoria. I've never watched Euphoria, but him playing this kind of like zanned out SoundCloud rapper guy, I had to like stop myself, be like, that's not, he's acting. Yeah, that might not be what this guy is like. Because I'm just getting unreasonably angry at him. So he's good at being this awful man that I don't want to be around. As a
character, I could not stand his voice. I could not stand the way he talked to other people. But I liked how it was a chamber piece. I liked how it's all set up of like, we're going to be in this mansion and oh my gosh, we're going to be trapped in here with a thing. And there's rules to it. And it's another one of those horror movies that's like, here's the rules, here's the, setup. And obviously there's some twists in it too, but I was entertained. I was not bored. I was on board the whole way, but it definitely felt like, I don't know, kind of like watching a movie like 30 Days of Night. Is that what it's called? Like just that sort movie. Of, 2000s era. It just, the action felt like that. It had the same sort of effects to it. Had the same sort of climax to it. It was fine. It was fine.
Dan Stevens.
Yeah, Dan Stevens is great. I like how the Dan Stevens are like, all right, Dan, we need you to do an American accent for this. And he's like, great, let me go to my notes. And he just watched Tom Hardy in Venom. Because like, I don't know what he's trying to do, but I love it. Is it Boston? I don't know. Love him.
Dan Stevens is easily my favorite current working male actor. I mean, I just absolutely adore him. I'll watch him in anything. He's fantastic. Anyone listening to this that hasn't seen The Guest, watch The Guest. And if you don't love Dan Stevens yet, watch The Guest and you'll probably realize that you love Dan Stevens.
Well, and it's so funny coming from like knowing him from Downton Abbey. And then now I'm like, oh, he's going to be weird in this. I'm very excited.
And he's great. And he's great in Downton Abbey as well.
But he, I think part of my problem with it was, again, sort of like just having a hard time getting on this movie's wavelength where like the first 10 minutes should have been 3. It opens with this heist and it's not punchy or moving at all. There's just a lot of just setup. And it's not even like you're really introduced to the characters. That doesn't happen until later. It's just felt very belabored. So I started thinking about like, well, why is it taking so many of these people just to kidnap this little girl and then babysit her?
Mm-hmm.
There's something seems up. So it just didn't have that momentum to make me not start wondering what the hell I'm even doing watching this thing. And when stuff starts to kick off, I started to enjoy it more. And I like that Giancarlo Esposito isn't just doing Gus Fring, isn't just doing his like, I'm this cold. Like he's still playing a tough badass, but it's a little bit looser. I like him as bugging out and do the right thing. I'd like to see him do some more goofy stuff, but I mean, that's not what's paying the bills right now. Yeah, so I just had a little bit harder time going on. Like the performances were great. It was nice to see like Dan Stevens and that other guy who was in
X-Files.
Kevin Durand, the guy that was in Raptor, that awful Nicolas Cage movie that we watched.
Oh yeah.
He was actually pretty good in this.
He was
pretty good.
Yeah, it was like because I was trying to figure out what his voice was, and they revealed he was Quebecois. I was like, oh, okay. But like that, some of the humor like was a little bit too basic, and then there was a little bit too much of that kind of quippiness that didn't really land for it. When the big bad shows up, I guess I'll just tease it like that way. That whole scene was great. I don't know who that actor is, but thought it was great. And like there were parts of it that were fun. It didn't do it for me. I think it's still worth checking out. Mm-hmm. It's fun.
You want an easy breezy like action.
The gore and the effects were fun.
Michael, I hijacked potentially your pick with Abigail. Did you have another one?
There's a couple things I want to mention that I'll just open for discussion because I think that
like more of a lightning round type of thing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Let's do a lightning round. So there's 3 things I'm going to mention here, and a couple of them I don't want to spend too much time on. First, I watched Misery for the first time. I somehow lived 46 years of my life without having seen Misery. And I finally saw it, and I did really enjoy it. I think if I have any complaints about Misery, it's just that it was kind of exactly what I knew it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really anything more than exactly what I thought it would be. So there's that little bit of disappointment of like, maybe it would have thrown a curveball at me that I never knew was there. Right. But no, in fact, it is exactly what you think it is if you know the basic outline of that story. But very well made, very well acted, of course. And it's like 2 hours long and it just zipped by. Made me want to watch more rollerball guy movies. What's his name?
I didn't expect you to say that. Rollerball.
John Frankenheimer. Yeah. No, that wasn't John Frankenheimer. Who did?
No, I'm talking about rollerball. Yeah. I'm talking about James Caan.
James Caan. Yeah.
James Caan is the star of the original rollerball guys.
Sorry, we watched the like 2002 rollerball. It is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Yeah. I'm being really negative this episode. I don't like it, but that is legitimately just an awful movie. And a guy went to jail over it, which rules.
Only know James Caan from 3 movies, even though I know he's like a famous guy and I know he's famous because he's in The Godfather and he has a famous death scene. But I'd seen him in Rollerball and I liked him a lot in that. And of course, I've seen him in Michael Mann's Thief and I liked him a lot in that. Yeah. So not only was it good to finally see Misery, it was good on a James Caan level to be like, okay, I've seen another good James Caan role. Right.
And playing a bit of a different character too than, the
very different. And it's a way more subdued role. And I actually read that the role was offered to other
tons
more famous than James Caan people, and they turned it down. And I don't know if this is true or not, but there was this sense of these male actors knew they were going to get outshined by the female lead of this movie based on reading the script. And they're like, oh, I don't just want to be in bed this whole movie and have her steal the show while I can't even get out of bed.
Right.
I don't know. It takes a great actor to elevate that role to me.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
He was perfect. He was totally perfect in it. And then second one I want to briefly mention is Don't Look Away. Myers joined me with this one to help me out because I was just on an island of suffering. This is, I said it at the time, I was like, they did it. The Michaels, because by the way, this movie is made by the Michaels.
Yeah, which by the way, sorry to interrupt, but so you have the Michaels. Abigail was directed by 2 guys.
Daniels.
What's with all these low T men making these horror movies? We need alphas like Mike Flanagan to come in and make horror great again.
Right. Yeah, alphas like Mike Flanagan.
Yeah. This beefcake He-Man like Mike Flanagan. No, yeah, it is. Sorry, but yeah, the Michaels have a lot to answer for.
They really do.
I want to watch this now because the two of you.
It's homework for you now. Yeah. Because I called it the worst horror movie I've ever seen. And
that's saying a lot.
Yeah. It achieved that because it started ripping off The Shining repeatedly.
Nuts to that.
Even without, the amazing thing about this movie is that even if you took out all of the insane sequences that just rip off The Shining word by word, it still sucks on toast. Like it's still a dog shit movie.
Yeah.
It's absolute dog pile, right? And then it also rips off The Shining. So,
and just like needlessly, like there's no point to it. It doesn't add anything. It's a bunch of, this is another problem I have with a lot of modern horror movies where it's just this empty aesthetic exercise, this referential stuff that doesn't add anything to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even like, this isn't, this is like teeny horror. This isn't real stuff. I'm too old and cool for the baby stuff. This is just a badly made movie that it's
incompetent. It's just downright incompetent. Yeah.
It is a direct ripoff of like one of the only good Doctor Who episodes, Weeping Angels. They can't figure out how to make the thing scary. There's a part where a character falls off a building. Previously, I had watched the not so great Zombie Holocaust, otherwise known as Dr. Butcher MD.
So good.
And there's a part where a guy, it's one of those like cannibal Holocaust movies, like kind of racist. These island people that just can't help but eat other people. But there's a part of that movie where a guy gets caught eating corpses at a hospital, and he runs out the window, jumps out, and it's clearly a dummy. And as it falls, the arm goes flying off. And when they cut, of course, it's back and he's fine. And that was more fun and believable than the body fall in this movie.
Right.
It's just very clumsily done. And I couldn't really tell you anything about any of the characters. It was awful. Do not recommend.
Oof.
That was a definite low light for me.
The last on the lightning round for me, but I'll kind of zing it over to you guys on this because I watched it because you guys had both watched it, was Dr. Giggles.
Yes.
And that was actually way more entertaining than I was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
I thought this was going to be one of those movies that I'm like, I'm glad I'm going to watch it because I've seen the poster my whole life. I remember the trailers on TV in the 90s constantly. And I somehow never actually saw the movie. I'm like, this is be a good one to just check off. I'll just check this off. But I was actually very entertained.
It's super
it was
fun.
A really amusing movie. And the zingers, the one-liners that Giggles has throughout the whole thing, always connected on just a complete, hammy, goofy ass level. But it was pretty funny.
Do you think he thinks he's being funny?
The actor or the character?
The character.
I'm going to psychoanalyze Dr.
Well,
Giggles.
I was just thinking about it watching, because there's some I think he's trying to be funny, but there's other times I think he's like, he means it.
Yeah.
But Larry Drake
he mostly means it.
Yeah.
I think he mostly means it because we're supposed to believe like this is a whole family thing for him.
Yeah.
He grew up into this. He's trying to please his father. He takes it very seriously, right? So yeah, I'm going to go with he means it.
It's kind of what I was getting at, where it's just like, this movie knows exactly what it is. And I don't even think it's that winky about it. It's just, this is a slasher movie with a Freddy style quippy, villain. Here you go.
Yeah.
Like it's not an amazing movie, but I had a lot of fun watching it. And it also is fun because it's got a Portland connection. It was filmed here.
The Dark Horse movie.
Portland, Oregon.
It was a Dark Horse movie. It was like, well, if not the first, it was one of the first Dark Horse movies. And they wanted to shoot it initially in this very posh neighborhood here called Eastmoreland. And all the people in Eastmoreland was like, we couldn't possibly have a horror movie here. So they built the mansion, the crummy mansion that Dr. Giggles lives in, like in a public park in Tigard, I think.
Oh, wow.
And then the people in Tigard were like, get that crap out of here as soon as you're done.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
No respect for horror.
No respect for Dr. Giggles.
No respect for Dr. Giggles. Yeah.
He is a doctor.
Yeah.
He went to 8 years of Giggle Medical School.
Yeah. Watch Dr. Giggles. That was a fun one.
So Myers, again, what's the name of the actor that plays Dr. Giggles?
Larry Drake.
Larry Drake. And so the only thing I recognize him from is Darkman, correct?
That sounds right.
He's Robert Durant in the first Darkman.
Okay. Is there anything else I should know Larry Drake from?
He made his, like the thing he was most known for is he played a developmentally disabled guy on LA Law for several seasons that worked in their office. That was like his big role in the 90s. He was in The Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, I think. But he's been a character actor in a lot of different stuff. For me, like some just quick hits is I rewatched Pieces, which is just bananas. And
Christopher George, man. Christopher George.
It is so stupid and just incoherent, but I love it. But in this very fun way. And I always forget that the It Stinks guy from Pod People is in it. And you get to see the It Stinks guy's little sizzler.
Yeah.
I forgot about that too.
And it does have one of the best taglines of all time. Pieces it's exactly what you think it's going to be.
Yeah. It's so bizarre. As my partner was slowly getting more introduced to horror, like a friend was seeing it at the Hollywood for their birthday, and they were very unsure about going to see it. And I was like, oh, what if it's gore, whatever. And it kind of starts out that way, but then it just gets insane.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, okay, now this gore doesn't bother me anymore.
Sure.
So that one was fun. I watched a couple of like straight to video, like shot on video ones that weren't like good. Like Blood Lake is a terrible movie, but it was just guys in Oklahoma just farting around.
Nice.
There's a whole part where there's like 10 minutes of them water skiing. It's awful. It's like VHS in the 90s, and they're just sitting around talking about how horny they are. Anytime anymore, if a movie has a like, we got together and made a movie, I'm a little bit more of a fan. I cut it to a lot more slack in that way. And then I was a little surprised by Cyclops, which is a very short. You can find it. I think archive.org is back up. It was down for a bit, but I know it was streaming there. But it's a Japanese movie. I have no idea what happened, but it ends with like 2 Resident Evil monsters fighting in an elevator. So it was nice. Some great like body horror physical effects stuff for me. And then Rabid. I forgot to add Rabid to my list. So technically 35 movies I've watched. I had not yet seen David Cronenberg's Rabid, which is really chilling. And porn star Marilyn Chambers is actually really good in it. I was pleasantly surprised by that. And the Canadianness of it all really works because it's so like uncanny. The lead guy like looks like a cross between Christopher Walken and Tobin Bell. And so that's very uncanny,
sexy.
But yeah. Oh,
have you seen Shivers yet? Speaking of early Cronenberg,
it's been a while since I've seen it. That one really got me, like just like made me feel bad, which is sort of designed to do.
I like it a lot.
So I've been a little bit trepidatious about getting back to it, but watching this, I know this deals with very similar themes, sort of about the nature of the destructive nature of desire and sexuality. It's on Tubi, so I might go and check that out. I think I'm kind of done exploring a lot of new stuff. I kind of want to just go back to my old favorites. I started off with The Beyond. I'm probably going to do the whole Fulci trilogy. My comfort Halloween movies at this point.
Yeah.
Well, your comfort Halloween movies should be Christopher George movies. And
yeah, basically.
He's the detective in Pieces. He's also in Fulci's City of the Living Dead.
Yep. Yeah.
And I'm looking him up here because I'm like, you know what? If I want to do a deep dive, if I want to pick an actor to do a deep dive on for that like comfort food feeling, a guy who just makes you feel relaxed, he starts talking and I'm just like,
yes, take me away, Christopher George.
Wish I could have some like psychoanalysis sessions with Christopher George, but he'd be like smoking a cigar the whole time.
Or, well, if it's in Pieces, he can't ever get it lit. That's
the joke, right? Yeah. But he has a really interesting filmography. I'm going to read off a few things here and see if I can whet some people's appetites for Christopher George. He's in Enter the Ninja from 1981.
Oh, that's right.
Didn't know that, but he is. He's in Grizzly 2, Revenge.
Which we watched.
He's in a couple different horror movies. Graduation Day from 1981. Mortuary from 1982. And he's also apparently in 1968, Massacre Harbor.
Oh, I love that title.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
So Graduation Day appears in, there's a movie I got from Vinegar Syndrome. Like I bought like they had some deal where it's like, and get a mystery movie. And I was like, okay, yeah, give me this mystery movie. And I got one called Night Screams, which is a slasher movie shot entirely in Kansas, which is fitting being, alongside Critters, which takes place in Kansas. But the movie starts, it's like it's a 3-disc set, and the 4K UHD movie starts with a disclaimer that says, hey, this is the theatrical release of this movie. And the distribution company, the producers, whatever, added in scenes from Graduation Day and additional loops. This was not the intended, like no one's happy that this is how it ended up. Lay on one of the other discs, we reconstructed the movie for what it's supposed to be. It's not really a great slasher, but whatever. But the first 10 minutes of Night Screams is people watching Graduation Day and just watching different kills from Graduation Day. And then later a character, because there's the teens at a house party, character's like, hey, I found a porn to watch. And they just start watching the porn. Like you see scenes with John Holmes in it. It's not the actual like pornography, but like the scenes leading up to it. And then later when two characters are like making out, it just cuts to this random woman in a shower. This is complete from another movie. And we're like, we got to pad this thing out. So I need to see Graduation Day simply because
come full
I've seen a lot of great kills in Night Screams from Graduation Day.
In fact, and it's starring Christopher George. So he gets top billing. So you know what? This is shooting up to the top of my list. graduation day.
Also, I watched Frankenstein for the first time. Never seen the original Frankenstein.
There you go.
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic.
Isn't it amazing that, a classic is just as incredible as its reputation?
Yeah, although to be fair, there were moments that I'm just thinking of Young Frankenstein. So like stuff that's supposed to be horrifying, I'm like thinking about Young Frankenstein.
I'm always thinking about Young Frankenstein. So, yeah.
Lightning round, Jim.
Yeah, I'll run through a couple of quick ones. John, you mentioned this earlier. Y'all discussed this on John and Alex Hate Stuff in a full episode. So I recommend you go listen to that. I saw the TV Glow. I think deserves as much encouragement to watch it as possible. So I didn't want to completely skip over it.
Totally agree.
I could have spent another hour talking about it. I love that
for
movie.
sure. I saw that at a film festival earlier this year or last year. I can't remember which. I mean, I want to say it's like something I've never seen before, which is hard to do these days. And I think that's a true statement. It's not quite horror. It's definitely more like horror adjacent. It's a trans allegory. It's all about being obsessed with TV shows in the 90s. It had an atmosphere that really, really worked for me. And it was unlike anything I think I've seen before. So I think you should check that out.
My favorite thing was how in the first act of the movie, how realistically and effectively it establishes the kind of friendship that the two main characters have. How it's not sexual, but maybe for the guy, he's not sure if that's what she means to him or not. You definitely get a sense that he just doesn't even really know.
Yeah.
It's definitely not for her. They're kind of friends in that way that feels very realistic, which is like, this person, you recognize maybe you have some things in common, you start spending time together, but you don't actually know each other at all. I mean it as a specific to that age and that sort of grade of school, like being in, early high school or middle school, whatever it's supposed to be. They're clearly older than they're playing, but it just really nailed the vibe of like, okay, we hang out now, but it's really guarded and it's really delicate and it's really sort of unclear what it even means. And it's the kind of friendship that could have just the next day could have ended forever or the next day could go on and to be something much, much deeper. And it just felt really real to me.
Yeah. I actually, the director of that, their first movie, We're All Going to, well, I don't know, it's the first movie, but their previous movie, We're All Going to the World's Fair is also streaming on Max. And so I'm planning to check that out as well. I've seen it before and I really enjoyed it. It's a different movie, but it's wonderful.
That one,
I
TV
really
Glow
that one.
leans really heavily on song choices as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes that bothers me in movies. I kind of prefer scores to songs, soundtrack type songs, but I thought TV Glow actually did it really well. Or maybe I just liked the songs. I don't know sometimes, but what interested me about this choices is I looked up some of the artists and they are contemporary artists, but maybe there's something going on in indie music right now where things are maybe swinging back to like 2004, 2005 era indie music, because this movie, the trailer and then the movie itself has a cover of a Broken Social Scene song that I hadn't heard in like 15 years. And it was so weird to hear that song again. Forget the name of it right now. I can look it up later, but like, it's a really memorable song, but I know the original Broken Social Scene version. And this is like a cover of it, but even just to cover a song from that era. And then a lot of the other music in it just feels like music that Jim and I were listening to when we lived together in like 2003, 2004, and it gave me a weird time warp feeling because I have not heard that kind of, I would still call it kind of indie rock, sort of dreamy, sad indie rock. There's I haven't heard that kind of music, certainly not in like a movie that I've watched for years and years. So
I also I haven't sought out that type of music. And so when it's being presented to me in the context of a movie that I'm watching, like it does hit me a little bit harder because, I wasn't expecting it, I guess.
And it lets me utter a sentence I never thought I would say. Great performance by Fred Durst.
There you go. Yeah. Watch for Fred Durst.
Is he in it?
He's the father.
Yeah, he's the dad.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, which like allegorically speaking makes tons of sense.
Yeah.
But like just I thought he did a good job. I mean, he doesn't have to do a ton, but I thought it was a perfect casting.
Yeah.
Wow, I learned that tonight.
Yeah, but absolutely, yeah, like big, huge recommend for I Saw the TV. For being more down on modern horror. Like there's still good stuff out there.
I don't even know if it's horror though, is it?
Yeah, like, I mean, I can't really because it's not really I could say about like modern horror in general because there's so many. People are making 8,000 Sasquatch movies as we speak. So there's a bunch of stuff happening, but what's being elevated right now, there's a lot of it that it's not doing it for me, but there's still stuff out there that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
One that I want to touch on really quickly is because I don't think either of the two of you watch it. It's a 1983 Austrian film called Angst. I looked it up. I was just in the mood for something mean, and boy, was it mean. It's basically just following a killer who gets released from prison after he's done his time. And what does he do within the same day? He promptly goes and terrorizes a family in their home. It's based on the real life murder case of a guy named Werner Kinzniek. And you're basically just watching this guy terrorize a family for a solid hour or so with some voiceover. Reminded me of Clockwork Orange at times. A little Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. I have still not delved completely into Gaspar Noé, really, but this is a favorite of his. So if that tells you anything, but it's gross, it's stylized, it's uncomfortable, and it's it's definitely worth watching for that kind of movie. So I was happy to. I had heard of it before, but it was one of those like weird outliers that I kind of jumped on this October, and it stuck with me. It's nasty if you want something like that. And
I understand there's a cute dachshund in it.
Yes. Oh yeah. It appears a couple times, definitely.
Yeah, I've heard it's similar to Marley and Me.
Oh yeah.
With the dachshund,
very Marley and Me. Yeah. For maybe a last lightning round pick, this is an easy one. This goes way in the opposite direction of Angst, but Michael and I saw Night of the Creeps at the Hollywood Theater a couple nights ago, and it was fantastic.
It really was.
1986 flopped when it came out. Tom Atkins, college, like kind of 80s movie almost in a lot of ways, mixed with zombies, slithering aliens.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
I love horror movies when they have this like, or just 80s movies in general, how they were obsessed with like frats and sororities as a setting. I don't know why, but it totally works. Whether you're watching like Animal House or Porky's, or in this case, a horror movie like Night of the Creeps, it's just, you realize it's such a perfect environment for setting a story like this. These like
bunch of young hot people all in one place to like slaughter. Yeah. You know, that's just
but also protagonists that we can relate to, because the whole concept is, we really want to fit in with the jocks at the cool, the cool boys at the fraternity, but like they're clearly never going to be accepted by those people, never going to like them. But of course, they're actually a lot cooler than those guys are. And you just, the way the movie handles that material of these guys' quest to kind of like get in with those dudes for the reasons that they have, which is of course getting the girls. It's weirdly believable. It's like weirdly like heartfelt. And rather than just being kind of throwaway, here's some guys at a fraternity, like every scene of that movie always surprises me because I care so much about what our protagonists are attempting to do. That seems to transcend like the genre and the style of movie that it actually is. Yeah. They don't make it feel perfunctory. Like, we just got to get through these story beats to get through whatever. Like exactly. They actually care what's going on. It's fun. Yeah. A lot of fun. It's a good again, Tom Atkins in his Tom Atkins nest, maybe. He is he is very himself. And, on the heels of that, there's like a couple of like very emotional beats without spoiling anything. Like the tape recording that I know that both of you know so good really gets me each time that I watch that movie. The opening shot of the movie just is an automatic fist pump for me. So if any of you listeners are firing up Night of the Creeps for the first time, that opening shot, just think of me when you do.
we didn't talk about it in the episode, but when Critters started, my brain immediately went to Night of the Creeps.
There you go. Yeah. I thought of Critters this time watching Night of the Creeps in the theater because, starts off with like a whole other movie that could have been going on that we start with.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of one last little hit, speaking of aliens, I watched The Alien Factor, which is another movie from Don Dohler, who did Night Beast.
Oh,
that we've all watched before. It is.
Oh, Night Beast.
It doesn't have the propulsion of Night Beast. It's a lot slower, but there's 3 aliens this time. There's something about these movies that I just really like. Like they're not good. They're full of padding, whatever. But there's just, I don't know if it's just the constant synth noodling that's happening throughout it, but I find them kind of hypnotic.
Nice.
And so there's one, the Fiend. I think people say that's his best one. I haven't found that one yet, but Alien Factor is like, if you want Night Beast slowed down, but with more aliens.
Well, now we got to do Fiend.
Constant synth noodling. You should hang out at my house more. You'll be right in your happy place. It's always constant synth noodling going on here.
Whatever movie you're watching, you're just adding your own soundtrack.
All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for Fright Boy 2024. Let us know what you've been watching in the Instagram comments down there. I think this is a nice, solid grab bag of different styles. We've got everything from nasty to gory to kind of fun in there. So I bet you can, if you want some good suggestions as you round out this October and into November, let's face it, pick some of these.
Oh, I only watch Westerns in November. Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
It's not Noirvember?
Noirvember. Yeah. Michael, thanks as always for joining us again.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
Tell everyone where they can find you and what you're doing on the internet.
Oh, sure. So my latest release is Night Shifting by Haunted Hospital. I would encourage you to check that out on Bandcamp. Haunted Hospital is my Italo horror synth funk project.
It rules.
Night Shifting is the debut album, 10 songs of goblin influenced Italo horror synth funk.
And John, what do you just your usual shit, right?
Just my usual. I'm just going to be listening to that album.
Yeah.
So don't worry about what I'm
Thank you.
Right.
Well, it actually segue and not to put you on the spot, but your Doom Jazz album, Guilt Noir, is my go-to fall album.
Oh,
so
nice.
that will segue coming out of Halloween right into the gloominess of fall.
there you go.
Guilt Noir, check that out.
All right, everyone. Well, have a happy end of year October. Let us know what you're watching in the comments where I post this on Instagram, and you can find us there at This May Hurt a Bit Pod. You can find us on YouTube at Hurt a Bit Pod, and you can email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. So if you're listening to this in order, make sure you fire up Critters 3. We'll be back talking about that here very soon. So until then, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
This has been a Caretaker Press production. It was produced by James Strayer and edited by John C. Myers. Logo by Ethan Kimberling and music by Michael Arthur Holloway, who you can find on Bandcamp. Follow us on Instagram at This May Hurt a Bit Pod and email us at thismayhurtabitpod@gmail.com. Give us a 5-star review over on your favorite podcast app, and we'll see you next time.